I reactivated the Archdiocesan Pastoral Council a few years ago, and one of their first projects has been putting forward a good pastoral plan. I think we could use the term a roadmap that with the help of God's grace will help us look at the next 5 years and see how we can get to where we'd like to go. We were able, first of all, to interview, to meet, to gather together the peoples of our archdiocese in some really very focused sessions on what they thought our needs were, what our hopes were, and some ideas of how we could get there. We had lots of listening sessions. We also sent out questionnaires. With those results and with some analysis, we reached a point where we can say, yes, we have some ideas for a pastoral plan. And so it's a roadmap for the future. It's the result of our faith, which is given, and our consultation of our people, which isn't a given, but which is a genuine way of ascertaining, figuring out where our own people and our priests, our religious, think we should go. So that's the backdrop for our pastoral plan. One difference we have in our pastoral plan from, let's say, other dioceses in the United States that are experiencing, maybe in the Northeast, some lessening of population, is we have the opposite problem. We're getting bigger all the time. Certainly, when you talk about a pastoral plan, you talk about a vision of who we are and where we'd like to go. Certainly, when we talk to our people, what emerged from their desires, their hopes, was analyzed by our Archdiocesan Pastoral Council, and they used a very interesting formulation to describe, how shall I say, an initial vision. Drawing on the opening of one of the most important documents of the Second Vatican Council, the document on the Church, Lumen Gentium, Light to the Nations, that document says the Church is a kind of communion, an interesting word. That word was repeated in a very strategic document that our late Holy Father, Blessed John Paul II, gave us in the year 2000 in a Latin title that is almost unpronounceable, Novo Millennio Ineunte, which means with the new millennium underway or beginning. That's the name of the document. Blessed John Paul II took a look at what was happening in the future for the whole church. And he said, before we do any planning, before we do any calculations, we need to understand that the church is, first of all, a communion, a body that lives in unity with Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ could only describe himself as his unity with the Father, his union with the Father. And that his wish was that those who followed him, those who are the members of his church, would, with the direction of this interesting glue of the Father and the Son, whom he named appropriately the Holy Spirit, he wished that his church would be with him and the Father through the Spirit as a communion. And our Archdiocesan Pastoral Council were very much taken by this phrasing, tried to unpack it, and their point to me and to others on the council was, you know what we need to develop really intensely here is a kind of spirituality of being in communion, being brothers and sisters to one another, recognizing the uniqueness of individual persons, of the richness of the ethnic groups that are in our archdiocese, and even the richness of those who need to be invited. Perhaps some of them are those who have walked away or those who've never heard the gospel message. In any case, for a vision of our future, in light of what our people want and hope for in their Catholic faith, the APC, as we call it, the Archdiocesan Pastoral Council, has used the vision, a spirituality of communion, to describe where we'd like to go in our efforts in the years to come. When the APC began to unpack the spirituality of communion, they came up with the word pathways. As you notice, the terms our APC uses are usually dynamic terms. That is, terms that go from one place to a goal, or terms that indicate agency and activity. I like that idea. The pathways that the APC came up with were threefold: that we should nurture our faith, that we should share our faith, and that we should live our faith. And using those three pathways of a spirituality of communion, they began to indicate ways we can do all that. Obviously, if we're going to live our faith, I'll use that one first, we have to find ways to form Catholics of all ages. Youth, young adults, those who are aging, and our Archdiocese has plenty of people of all those groups. We are most especially concerned about our youth and young adults. Now, you also have to nurture our faith, and we saw that as being welcoming to one another, especially the notion of welcome entered here. And I suspect the reason for that one is that we have so many people who not only have different cultures, but different languages, who are all part of our local church. In fact, it's a tag of honor for our Archdiocese that we celebrate Mass on the weekend in upwards to 16 different languages. We need to nurture one another. This means stretching our hearts a little bit, stretching our generosity, not just of our treasure, but more importantly, stretching the treasure of our hearts. The sharing our faith aspect is perhaps more to do with institutionally finding ways through our education and formation to get our people intelligent about their faith, intelligent about the meaning of prayer, and I finally might add, intelligent about sharing talents and goods with one another and even with a larger community. So if we were to take the three pathways that the spirituality of communion has tried to pull at us, the church in the next few years here in this Archdiocese is going to look at various aspects of our faith, how we're doing. In some cases, we're doing okay. Where we may need to improve, or where we simply need some new adventures to help us nurture, live, share our faith. Once we have these pathways, what's going to happen in the fall of this year is we're going to have parishes sit down, and with the help of some structure given by our Archdiocesan Pastoral Council, to identify the ways in which we are already a spirituality of communion. To identify the places, to identify the institutional structures, the formational elements, our ways of worship and liturgy, in which we are already inviting people to nurture, share their faith, live their faith. I think a number of our parishes will be surprised that the language of communion is already on their lips and on their tongues and hearts, but they perhaps not used the language that way. Once the parishes, and all our parishes are going to be asked to do this, once they have identified what they're already doing, we're going to bring all of our parishes together in groups, and we're going to have them share their best practices, their ways of doing it. And what we hope will come about is everyone's going to see, but there's still some things we can do. There's still some ways in which this communion of cooperating and respecting one another can be done. Further, while the parishes are doing this, the central offices of the Archdiocese themselves are going to be looking at these pathways, and their job is, how can we help the parishes, the people of our Archdiocese, with our specific skills to help them to realize this? We have many excellent diocesan offices. They can bring some real resources to parishes who may need one or another thing that they sense would be helpful to them in realizing this communion. My own estimation of this is, with the grace of God and the gift of the Holy Spirit, and with some excellent pastoral matters that are already going on in this Archdiocese, my hope is that we will grow in our intensity of respect and love for one another, we'll grow in holiness for the Lord, and that will almost naturally spill over into a credible witness to the world around us.